Everyone, I think we just wait 2 more minutes.
Hello, hello. So, just as a reminder, actually, no, sorry. Thanks for coming in first. We'll start the seminar proper in about a minute's time. Thanks for coming to our very, very first public seminar for everybody. Okay, we will be recording the seminar. So, if you don't want to be recorded, you can just turn your cameras off. But otherwise, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to speak or type your questions down in the chat and we'll get to them at the appropriate time. I also have a personal habit of speaking really, really fast. So if I'm speaking too fast, you just slow me down or ask me to clarify again. Okay, great. It's 9:05 now. Let me just welcome you guys. This is our game day preparation seminar. And we're hosting it for the very first time for our fourth anniversary. And this is just for a way for us to share information for newcomers to the sport, whether you are a coach or you are a lifter competing for the very first time. We hope that this will benefit you. And as with all seminars, if you have any questions at all, you have any discussion points, feel free to bring them up. Okay. So just to run through a brief introduction of us, you see a picture of us. There's 5 of us here. In total, there's 6. The values that we embody and try to embody is community, passion, and knowledge. And together we are like ENSŌ Powerlifting, a group of individuals who want to empower you guys by providing accessible knowledge that goes beyond the technical. So we recognize that powerlifting is not just a sport of strength, but also a journey of holistic development and personal growth. And we want to deliver coaching centered around you. It's believed that every athlete deserves to be the star of your own show. And we want to be a platform for people like you and I, whether or not you are a lifter, you are a coach, or you are a aspiring student club, okay, for you to share your journeys. And the content we provide draws upon your expertise and experiences. So just to show our faces here, I'm Wei Cong. Okay, and our second speaker for today is Wei Ying. Okay, I'll run through a brief introduction of everyone's personal specialities. So my own specialty experiences are mainly in like varsity scene. Okay, so I have interest in working with varsity clubs and a personal interest in working with injured individuals who might be lost in their training. Okay, so moving on to the right side of the screen, you have Victor, Jordi, and Jonas. So Victor, he loves to work with people working within interesting constraints. So you can be a architect student, you can be a doctor. So for example, if you have very, very interesting shift work balances and very difficult work-life schedules, you can choose to work with him and he'll try to help you enjoy the sport as much as you can. Okay. For Johnny, he wants to work with elite athletes, helping them to perform at their highest level, either on the national platform or the international platform. And then we have Jonas, who's our coach mentor, and he is looking to develop mentees with critical thinking and values that embody the best of the sport. And last but not least, we have Wei Ying, also known as Caifan. Okay, he has a very interesting background in psychology. He's probably the only person in Singapore who has specialized in doing a thesis for powerlifting and music as a way of psyching up. So you can ask him about his thesis later. He has a background in clinical psychology as well, and his passion is to work with beginners coming into sport. So don't feel like whatever level that you are at that you don't deserve to have sports side. Yeah? So everyone deserves to have the best given to them. So if you have any questions at all, any problems with nerves, can listen to the second half of this seminar. Okay, so this is the content that we're focusing on today. We are looking at three large categories. So the non-negotiables for competing in a powerlifting sport. So this will include the technical rules, the commands, and equipment. Next, we'll look at mental preparation and game day performance. This will be covered by Caifan. And under mental preparation, we'll be looking at goal setting, visualization, and self-talk. And lastly, we'll be looking at game day performance, how to navigate attempt selections, how to navigate bouncing back after a failed lift. So this is quite important for you guys. And then, of course, something that we want to regulate, which is level of arousal. So this arousal looks at the hype that you are creating for yourself and maintaining throughout the meet. Okay. So under the non-negotiables are these three factors, and I'll be following through you guys with. Okay. So the first part, technical rules. If you're not familiar, there is actually a IPF technical rule book every year. You want to sort of familiarize yourself with the rule book. So here we'll only be covering the IPF rules and competing within drug tested federations. So read it from front to back and back to front. Okay. You can also watch international meets and see if the new rules have been applied and how they are being refed. So this might be you watching the meets and trying to understand the reasons for the red lights. So this can be looking at international competitions for the depth. Okay, so usually international meets would be a good time for the IPF to enforce and reinforce the level of judging standards as well. Okay, other things that you want to familiarize yourself with is the weigh-in, the challenges and appeals for failed lifts, understanding the causes of disqualification for each lift. So for the squat, the bench, the deadlift, and then understanding the order of competition by which you proceed. So the squat, the bench, the deadlift, what do you do at each point? Okay, so we do have a beginner's guide to all this on our website as well. It's a little bit old, but it's still highly relevant. So do take a look at the article. Okay, so getting into the rules again, I'm going to broadly define it as old rules and new rules. So for the old rules, let's look at 2023 and everything before that. You want to familiarize yourself with the regular rules that always apply. So this will be, again, the causes of disqualification for each lift, the flow of the meet itself. You want to understand what to do at the weigh-in, the equipment check. Okay. As a beginner, you can be very quickly overwhelmed if you're not sure what you're doing. So if you're not sure and you are there on the meet day, right, just ask around. Okay. The officials, they are usually in a uniform. They will help you as best as they can to their abilities. Okay. You can also ask other coaches. So like local coaches are really, really very friendly. If you're really, really not sure, you're really very shy, you can always just approach the ENSŌ like coach on the game day itself. If you want to ask for any clarifications on questions. If you die, really not sure what to do, and you want someone to like handle all these details, you can always just work with a coach or a handler specifically for the day itself. And of course, all the same tips will apply to you if you are a handler. So if you're not sure of anything and you're handling for the very first time, you can refer to a guide as well. You can also ask other coaches and we'll all be very glad to help you. Okay, those are the old set of rules. So let's moving on to the new set of rules. If you're not familiar, read the IPF rulebooks for 2024. All the new rules will be highlighted in red. So those are the changes to the rulebook. Okay, so some things that you might be looking out for will be like there's a new rule to say that you can't contest other people's lifts anymore if you are from a rival team. Okay, and then for weigh-ins, this used to be quite common sense, but now it's reinforced in the rules that there is no like people, coaches or handlers of the different gender accompanying the lifter in with on the weigh-in. Okay, for local rules as well, there's no filming allowed in the coach box anymore, and it's also supposed to be enforced in the warm-up room. So you can be like chased out of the warm-up room if you are caught filming. So for local competitions, just take note of this. Okay, so other technical rules that might apply to you that's quite important. IPF is a drug tested federation that competes under WADAs. And WADA just recently introduced a new rule for no tramadol in season. So if you are someone who takes painkillers, quite strong painkillers, I just take note of this. Panadol will still be allowed, but no tramadol. Okay. Moving on, commands. So just to be very, very clear with you guys, the individual commands for SBD can be found in the IPF rule book as well. You want to be very clear on the commands and you want to be very clear on the disqualification criteria. So one thing is, the important thing is that as a lifter, you must train with commands approaching your game day meet. Okay, and as the handler, you must be able to understand the causes of disqualifications and you must strictly reinforce the commands during the warm-ups, or if you can, you train with the lifter themselves. Okay, so how to train with commands? Always get someone to assist you. Okay, you can video your lifts and look back and determine if, for example, during the bench press, if the bench press command is accurate. Okay, it should be motionless. It should demonstrate control of the bar. Okay, another example would be on the deadlift, you are holding the weight at the top, okay, and having someone else give you the down command. If you cannot have someone give you the down command, you have to wait and hold the barbell. So you just want to demonstrate control within the SBD, the 3 lifts, with the command at all times. Okay. Lastly, another rule that you can practice on your own is to walk the weight out and then waiting for 1 or 2 counts before you squat. So this will simulate the waiting for the command in the squat. So one tip for you guys is in the squat, after you finish squatting, you just stand there. The spotter loaders will bring you back. You technically don't have to wait for the rack command. You can just hold it there and he'll bring you back. So in this way, you take off the cognitive load for the third command. Okay. So if you're a handler, always be familiar with the subcategories and qualification, the clauses for disqualification. So you want to look at the different colors associated with the red lights. So for each lift, for example, the red card is usually with a lack of associated with a lack of range of motion. So in the squat, there will be lack of depth. So if you get a red light and a red card associated, then you know that that's the issue, and you need to be able to fix that on the spot for your next attempt with the lifter. Okay, because in the meet it's actually quite fast paced. It's quite difficult for you sometimes to understand like why you got the red card. Okay, or basically why you failed the lift. So understanding the subcategories and the colors themselves will allow you a greater control during the meet itself. And next, you want to check your technique with the lifter themselves. So videos would help, but in the war room, you always want to double check at all times. Just an anecdote, I had a lifter that I wasn't coaching, I was just handling him for the very first time, met him on a game day, and I didn't realize that his head was lifting off the bench press. Okay, so only during the heavy weights on the heavier warm-ups, then this habit starts to come out. And then we had to address it like 10 minutes before he stepped out onto the platform. So these are things that you want to look out for, okay, as a handler, especially if it's someone you are not familiar with. Okay, moving on to equipment. So equipment is technically part of the new rules and the technical rules, but I just want to split it up. Okay, so the underwear rule has always been enforced for all meets, but depicted on the right side, right top upper right corner, you must make sure that your underwear complies with the rules shown here. You can get rejected, okay, if you bring and wear a different kind of underwear. To be very, very sure. Okay. Other rules that will apply in terms of equipment will be the t-shirts. So I speculate that this is meant for judging the bench depth on the bench press. So they want you to have like form-fitting sleeves on the t-shirts. As a quick caveat, we actually modify our shirt printing specifically for this rule. So if you want to, you can always purchase a shirt from us. It will definitely fit within the new rule. Okay. Next part. There's also the rule about wearing the same singlet for all three lifts. So previously, people would wear like maybe 3 different singlets for all 3 lifts. So now they have standardized it and they enforce that you have to wear the same singlet throughout. It shouldn't be a very big issue for everyone. Okay, so the type underwear we already covered. Condition of equipment as well. It's actually quite important to check that your equipment is clean and is undamaged. So I've seen people with torn socks or torn shoes being rejected, and then they have to scramble on the day itself to borrow or to buy. So don't let that person be you. Okay. Now that you know this rule is in place, make sure that you double check your equipment. If it's dirty, clean it. If it's torn, just bite the bullet and get a new pair. Maybe it's sleeves or wrist straps. Why does the tire matter? Underwear or socks? So for underwear, so technically there's a special equipment out there that they are called briefs. So they allow you to lift more weight than actually doing it raw. So you can actually purchase it online. Of course, it's illegal. So those kind of briefs, they look like those boxer briefs that people wear. So which is also why you see the logo there. Like the only underwear that is banned are the underwear that looks like boxer briefs. So I actually personally encountered a situation in which a lifter wore the lifting briefs onto the platform and they were caught afterwards. Yeah. So this kind of rule is to circumvent cheaters. So it's a very, very, very old rule from the equipped lifting days. And it still exists nowadays because there's that opportunity for people to cheat. So for beginners like you might not appreciate this, but we just have to follow the rules. For socks, long socks are mainly for the deadlift. They don't want you to bleed all over the bar. So if you deadlift and your shin scrape against the barbell, it's not very pleasant if like 10 people do that and there's like blood all over the bar. That's the main reason. Okay. New rules for 2024 as well. They finally introduced like the one piece and the hijab for the new the Muslim female lifters. So they'll be releasing the equipment commercially soon. You have to take note of that. Take note of the kind of attire that you can wear as well. How do they check? This is done during the equipment check. Yeah. Fun. Okay. Okay. Moving on. There is actually an IPF approved equipment list. So this is for the personal equipment that you can wear. So you usually include like the lifting belt, the wrist straps, the sleeves. These are equipment that you need to make sure that they're approved. Okay, if you bring in a non-approved lifting equipment, you can get rejected during the equipment check itself. So a very famous, a very popular example would be the Pioneer belt. Okay. A more recent example would also be the Pioneer slash A7 belt level that you can technically use it with any other level belts. But if you mix equipment, it's technically counted as illegal also. So you have to buy the OG belt and use it. Okay. With everything in mind, you want to make sure that your packing list is like up to speed. Okay, so here's an example of a packing list at the bottom right hand side. You can take a screenshot and use it for your own reference. Okay, so moving on to the last part, general advice and other things about competition. So for the handler, some things that you want to prepare beforehand is you want to go through the game plan with the lifter and vice versa. You want to make sure that you're all on the same page regarding the lifter's goals, the placings, any previous PRs that they have in meet or in training, as well as previously mentioned before, the lifter's technique. Okay, making sure that it's legal. So at this point, it's just making sure that the lift is going to be made to competition standard, and you're not trying to coach the lifter. And this is a very important distinction. The handler is there to help the lifter go through the meet efficiently. You're not there to coach the lifter unless you are their coach. The main thing here, it can be covered by Caifan later on, but basically you don't want to distract the lifter as much. You want to make sure they're operating at 100% and not bombarding them with more cognitive load and new cues that they might not be familiar with. Okay. So other things that the handler will take care of, you want to make sure that you bring very, very simple things like a pen, a wristwatch. A wristwatch is quite on a day, but just bring it. It will help you with timing the meet itself. Other things will be the baby powder as well for the deadlift. So you can see here, Caifan is helping his lifter with baby powdering his thighs for the deadlift itself. So if you're not familiar, the baby powder is meant to introduce like a slippery like surface so that the bar glides up the thighs instead of catching on the skin or the tire of the lifter. Next thing, so I've previously mentioned that you want to have a game plan as the handler. Okay, the next thing is ditch the game plan if you have to. Adjust the situation at hand. Make sure you get the lifter's feedback after every attempt. Okay, and adjust the attempt selection accordingly. When you're not sure, trust your conservative call because this will build momentum throughout the meet itself. It's better to make a conservative call on the squats because you can make it up in the deadlift later. Okay, but if you fail a lift on the squat, not only does it affect the lifter physically, it affects both of you mentally. So you start like second guessing yourself, and it's not a great time for either of y'all. Okay, speaking of time, always watch the clock. It is very important for attempt submission. It is very important for time left to warm up. So you want to work backwards from the start of the flight and then gauge how many warm-ups you need. If you need to, you can refer to our beginner's guide article. It will show you an example and it will help you understand like how you can actually time the warm-ups. Okay, I've seen many situations in which the lifter was not prepared to actually lift and they have to rush out and do the first lift without even touching the barbell. Okay, it happens a lot. Another thing that happens as well is attempt submission. After the completion of the lift and the revealing of the lights, you have 1 minute as either the handler or the lifter to submit your next attempt. If you fail to do so, your next attempt will be written in for you and it will not that usually not be what you want. Okay. So please submit your attempt within the next minute. If not, you just waste your one attempt. It's not great. Okay. So pretty much that's everything I want to cover regarding the technical aspects of the meet. Okay. So you are technically ready to compete now. You know the rules. You know the standards that you are held to. As a handler, you should be familiar at this point. So what are we going to do now? We're going to cover the mental preparation. And this is where Caifan will step in and he'll take over the rest of the seminar. Okay? Let me just answer some questions in the chat first, Caifan. Okay. So for Moritz, automatic attempt selection by attack table. So if you failed the lift, let's say you went up for your first squat, you fail on that. They will, and when they automatically submit your next attempt, they will repeat the lift When for 100 kilo squat, you will be taking the 100 kilo squat again if you do not submit an attempt. Okay. If you succeeded at the lift and it's approved, so you get the 100 kilo squat, the next lift that's chosen for you will be 102.5 kilograms. So you bumped up 2.5 kilograms. So yes, you're right, it's 2.5. It is not usually, it is in the rule book, they can only go up by 2.5. Yeah. So different scenarios, different things. If you fail the lift, you'll be retaking the same number. After lift, you'll be taking 2.5 above your previous number. Okay. So that's it from me. Pass on to Caifan now.
All right, thanks, Wei Cong. Hi, everyone. My name is Wei Ying, but you can call me Caifan because my IG handle is shreddedbycaifan. All right, so let's talk about competing. So, as many of you who have competed already, right, you all will know that competing is much more than just simply lifting weights, lah. Because in a competition setting, it also involves other competitors, other environmental factors, and also a foreign environment that you have to navigate on meet day itself. And most of the time, we haven't been to that environment before. Right. So what happens? So when encountered with these kinds of high stakes, especially in competition, where you spend many hours and a lot of energy and effort training for, we may appraise the situation as a chance to showcase our training, or sometimes view it as a threat, and that results in anxious feelings. So when the situation is viewed as a threat, we automatically will have reactions that follow, including increasing heart rates, feeling more tense, worrying about your own performance or your opponent's performance, and also worries about screwing up the lifts that you've trained so hard for. So these are normal, but it will also affect our ability to perform, resulting in less than ideal performance that you've expected. So, as mentioned earlier, so if you take a look at the following worry cycle, so when we're faced with an anxiety-provoking situation such as a competition, it leads to either a physiological response or a cognitive response, right? So cognitively, we start thinking about hypotheticals like what if I fail the next lift? What if the competition doesn't go as how I expect? And physiologically, our body becomes more tense. It leads to emotional and behavioral responses, as you can see below. So emotionally, we might get we might start to panic. We might start to feel frustrated as to why we aren't performing up to how we expect, and that results in poorer performance and maybe even a worse appraisal than before the competition started. So that leads to the cycle again. As you can see, the arrows are multi-directional, which means they can influence one another. So let me give an example here. So for example, you're in the gym and then you're feeling sad and your body starts, your brain starts having negative thoughts, becoming distracted about lifting, which is the cognitive aspect. And then it starts giving you a stomach ache, which is the physiological aspect. And ultimately resulting in a poor performance, because you can't brace properly, you aren't 100% focused on the competition itself, or the lift itself. All right. So this is where mental preparation skills come into play. So by setting our expectations right and planning for certain situations or how we respond to situations, we can avoid scenarios where we become overwhelmed and feel threatened. So first off, we'll be looking at goal setting, imagery, and self-talk. All right. So before we even begin prepping for a meet, we have to talk about goal setting, because this can be done periodically and reviewed consistently throughout training for the meet itself. But we should always have a clear reason why we are competing. If you aren't just going for fun and trying it out, but even then you still have the goal of trying it out, right? So aside from that, having a clear reason why you're competing. So are there specific numbers or significance to the meet itself? Is this like a meet where you have to hit a certain total to qualify for nationals, or even to get nominated for regional or international competitions? Are there close competitors to you? Are you looking to place? Yeah. So all these are things that you should consider lah. So if we look at goals specifically, there are a number of different types of goals, which some of them are outcome goals. And these outcome goals focus on specific situations, like having certain numbers to hit. So these outcome goals should be realistic and achievable. But most importantly, whatever is there on meet day, will be there. But if we set goals out of reach, then it wouldn't help our process at all. Performance goals are there to redirect us to focus inwards, to think about perhaps how we are moving the weight, how we feel when we move the weight, right? Process goals are there for you to focus on the process of training itself. Perhaps when the meet is too far away the picture, it can guide us through our training sessions. So thinking about a specific RP that we want to hit during a specific training session, or even achieving or using all of the cues that our coach has told us to do during the training session. All right. So as mentioned earlier by Wei Cong, it's important to have a game day planner, and remember to adequately prepare with your coach a midday card, which clearly states out what numbers there are for you to hit and what these numbers are required, in case you are aiming for a certain total. All right. So next, let's talk about imagery. So I'm sure a lot of us have imagined ourselves, standing on the platform at your third deadlift, and then when you pull, then the bar goes up like damn fast, and then you win the meet, and then everyone is cheering for you. Much like when Ashton pulled as the last lifter in the meet to Enchanted by Taylor Swift. Yeah. So that's a situation where we like to imagine, because we hope that someday it will be us. But it's also useful to use the imagery to help us lift better and reduce our anxiety. So how does this work? So basically, you can simulate and recreate an experience in your head by visualizing a similar scenario. So this scenario doesn't have to be unrealistic, like what I mentioned about goal setting earlier. It can be quite it can just be you nailing your third attempt. Yeah. So this helps also to prime physical coordination of the movement of your joints and limbs, and also enhance self-confidence, because if you pictured it 1,000 times, more or less you'll be more confident in hitting the lift, right? So when preparing for a meet, we can create a specific meet-related visualization script. So this can include, you're going through your warm-ups, what you do with your feet. I know some of you have certain rituals that you like to do before you get under the bar. So picturing that in your head, and when it gets to the competition time itself, things are more or less familiar for yourself. Yeah. Okay. So next, let's move on to self-talk, which is basically the inner dialogue that occurs within us. And sometimes, when we feel nervous, then we start telling ourselves like, oh, can I really do it? Maybe I cannot do it. Or if you feel like you are stronger than everyone, you'll be like, oh, this is too easy, right? So when we are feeling nervous or having a high arousal state, oftentimes, we'll appraise the situation as a threat, like I mentioned earlier, and we begin talking down ourselves, which ultimately will lead to failure. So even a weight that you've done before, if you're feeling super nervous and then you start tensing up, you won't be able to do the weight. But by shifting the content of what we talk to ourselves about, we can start to we can use this self-talk to motivate ourselves instead. So these self-talk should be kept simple and without like technical terms. You can also use it for cues, such as standing tall, standing proud, rather than having a long ass sentence before you lift. Like you think to yourself, oh, I need to put my 2 feet under the bar, and then I stand up, and then I brace my core before I walk up, something like that. Yeah. So that would be ineffective because it's a bit too long for you to think about. All right. Okay. So let's move on to game day itself. So come the day of the competition, the situation becomes a lot more dynamic and will require us to adapt. So as mentioned by Wei Cong earlier, if the situation calls for it, you can completely throw the game plan out of the window. Right. But we should also be prepared to meet the demands of the situation, rather than striving to prepare for every scenario. So this means preparing like a set of responses and schemas to different types of scenarios that might occur. Okay, so let's talk about arousal regulation. So arousal is basically the state of readiness to perform. So when we are asleep, we are basically at the lowest arousal state because we are not even awake. Whereas when we are panicking, we're at maximum arousal. So managing arousal is the key to performance. So like I mentioned earlier, when we are nervous, our arousal is at its maximum. And then we start panicking, and then that ultimately leads to failure. So we also don't want to be too not aroused at all, where we're basically falling asleep on midday. Like we just want to go home and sleep. Right. So the key is to find a balance for yourself, because every individual is different, and optimal levels are specific to the individual, based on this theory called the individual zones of optimal functioning. And meets are generally marathons, if you think about it. They're not sprints, because we have to, while we're only lifting for like 9 minutes, right? The entire 9 minutes is spent across like 5+ hours, which a lot of time is spent dealing with your own internal thoughts and sitting down there and waiting, right? So when we are feeling not at a very low arousal state, it's important for us to bring that arousal up. So this can be something using something like smelling salts, or getting someone to hype you up, or listening to fast tempo music that really brings up the emotions. Whereas if you are in a high arousal state, you want to bring that down, especially if you are not a lifter who thrives on that head banging SPA type vibe, right? So you want to use like calming techniques, the self-talk, visualization, breathing techniques, in order to redirect your attention and also bring down your heart rate a bit. So here is a sample arousal regulation plan. Basically, what it is you can plan for certain times of the meet where you do certain things. So at the end of the day, you are clear on what you should do. Like maybe if you have a specific routine for deadlifts, then that's when you execute that routine. And also throughout the meet, you should be, if you take caffeine, then you should plan when you're going to take that caffeine, when you're going to take the pre-workout, and not wait for on the meet day itself, and then when they're calling your name, and then you're down there dry scooping your pre-workout, right? Yeah, so be prepared. All right, next. So the key to building a huge total is to make all your attempts, right? So going 9 for 9 should be it gives you the best shot at achieving a big total. But decision making is also dependent on a lot of factors, different factors. It's dependent on your competitiveness, your own ability, and your opponents, right? Are there many opponents? If there are 10 opponents within 10 kilos of each other, how are you going to navigate that? The attempts that you select is going to change. It's going to vary greatly, but if there are many opponents with the same total, right? And also, according to your own training standards, how big of a jumps are you used to? Yeah. But in general, for openers, it should be around 90 to 92%, and second attempts 96 to 98, and third attempt, if you are looking to break PRs, then shoot for above the 100%. But of course, this percentage has to correlate with your own training as well, right? And at the end of the day, don't hold these numbers too close to heart, because we eventually have to play by ear as well. Because the meet day the meat environment might be completely different from what we expect or what we are used to. So we have to account for the heat or the humidity, which might lead to cramps, poor sleep the night before because of anxiety, or just feeling anxious on the day of the meet itself. Yeah. All right. And how nutrition also plays a part. Have you had your carbs for the day before you leave? Have you had caffeine? Or have you had enough caffeine? You bring enough food for the day? Another thing is also the warm up environment. So recently we've been blessed with a lot of meets, but also these meets were held in gyms, which is a constrained environment. So there's very little space to move around or sit around. And that also factors into how fast you're taking your warm-ups, how fast between attempts there are. All right. But and a very OG powerlifter once told me that an opener should be something you can get up at 3 a.m. and do. So that's something should keep in mind as well if you don't want to, bomb out. All right. So what happens when the meet does not go according to how we expect? So as mentioned before, many things can happen. There are a lot of factors in the meet, which and one of those things can just include missing the lift based off your strength. Like you're just not strong enough that day, which is fine. And sometimes 2.5 kg is a bit too much, and we might need a smaller jump. Or other technical errors like jumping the bench command because we're too nervous. All right. Or just barely hitting that. So variation in the referee standards also might affect how our attempts are judged. Oops, sorry. Yeah, but the rule of thumb should always be to repeat your attempts, especially your openers, because we want to hit the opener so that we don't put ourselves in a very high stress situation where it's the last attempt and we still haven't made any lifts. Okay, so we want to secure our openers and ensure that we have a total at least. So the mindset after you miss the lift should be to try to identify any mistakes. So the handler should be doing this and letting the athlete know. And we should move on from all the self-blame and all the rumination and redirect our attention back to the competition itself and making the next lift. So whenever we're done with one attempt, we forget about it and we focus on the next, because thinking about the previous attempt wouldn't serve any purpose. Yeah. If you think about it, the goal of the meet is to keep making the next attempt. Whereas if we start thinking about the past, then it doesn't serve any purpose at all, right? So start to refocus yourself by thinking about the next lift and the cues that you have to, and your cues and your rituals for the next part of the meet. Okay? And that is the end of my section. Does anyone have any questions? Sorry if I was speaking a bit too fast, because it's very quiet. Any previous slides that you want to see? This one?
I'm going to drop some links in the chat. So this link is the article that ENSŌ has for people who want to understand the flow of the meet for their first powerlifting meet. Then this is the IPF rulebook. If you want to take a look through it. This is the approved list for personal equipment. So all of these things you can find online. Okay. Is there any way to combat not being able to sleep the night before? That's a very good question. Saifan, you want to take this
Yeah,
one?
yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, you're right. I think not being able to sleep before is perfectly normal. It's perfectly fine because we train like what I mentioned earlier, lah. We train very long. You put in a lot of effort, and this is something you're looking forward to. So naturally, you will be quite aroused, lah, when you are sleeping at night. Um, I think one good way to try is to sleep, go to bed a bit earlier to account for the time where you spend just lying down and thinking, right? And then another thing is to accept all these negative feelings, like all these anxious feelings. You're going to feel anxious because it's something you value greatly. Yeah. Mm, aside from that, physically think of setting your a time where you fall asleep for the entire week, because um, our sleep cycle isn't just determined by what time we go to bed, right? It's determined by how many hours we slept the night before and the night before, right? So try to set a schedule for the week of the meet itself, where you go to bed at a certain time, so that your body clock becomes more predictable. Yeah, am I making sense? Also look at caffeine as well. If you are taking caffeine on the day, mm, I wouldn't think if you are taking melatonin already, then it might be a ritual that you might want to continue using, lah. But I cannot comment on the specific nutritional element of melatonin. I think on midday it's important not to deviate uh, from your usual sleep cycle, lah, because you want to make sure everything else is as routine and predictable as possible, so you're not waking up like flustered. So let's say you try to sleep later or what, then you might wake up and then realize, oh, there's not enough time, or it might just completely throw your rhythm off. Yeah, so sticking to your usual wake time might be the best choice.
I think this is also a little bit contextual to the individual lifter. I mean, as always, no? But
Mm,
for people who are looking to weight cut, right, or water cut. Okay, so if you are competing for the very first time, please do not weight cut. Please do not water cut. But if you are a seasoned lifter and you're doing this, then your sleep schedule would definitely get affected. So I've had lifters who had to wake up very, very, very early in the morning and try to water cut the rest of the day just to make weight for an afternoon session. So the anxiety from making weight itself will also keep the lifter up at night. For Zion's question, right? I think Typhon previously gave me advice on this that I use pretty well with my lifters, which is let's say you have the D-Day, the D-Day competition is on Saturday. Friday is when you're sleeping. Thursday, you want to sort of start to tire yourself out already. Okay, tire yourself out on Friday itself, so that come nighttime you are able to sleep. Okay, so when you're tiring yourself out, it's not really like physically tiring yourself out, but making sure that you're occupied throughout the day. Uh, Remind me or correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Saifan did mention this as a part of a strategy to like distract yourself, making
mm,
sure that uh, all the anxieties are dealt with during the week leading up to the midday itself, so that it does not fester in the mind
mm,
the night before. Yeah.
yeah. So I think we've gone through a lot of different ways you can prepare yourself that uh, normally will keep you awake at night, lah. Like, did I bring this? Did I bring that? Or like, if I fail this attempt, then what happens next? So if we can have that game plan out already, and have that packing list out, then it's just one less thing to worry about, lah.
Yes, keep the questions coming. Quite good questions so far.
Any other slide that you all want to see? I think just now Wei Cong mentioned the screenshot. This one.
So you can take a screenshot of the midday packing list if you want to. Just to come back to Wei Song's question about the attire, that you're not confused. So for the underwear, they usually check it during the equipment check. So they usually just look at the stitching of the underwear if they are experienced ref and they know what to look out for. Basically, it's just to make sure that you're not wearing underwear that gives you any boost in lifting the weights itself. During the equipment check, you might already be wearing the underwear. So if that's the case, depending on the meet itself, you might be asked to check the underwear during the weigh-ins. Because for the weigh-ins, you're asked to strip down to your underwear and step onto the scale. So you're not allowed to actually wear extra clothes at that time. Hopefully this answers the question about the attire and why it matters.
Okay, keep the questions coming, but in the meantime, we have prepared a feedback form for our seminar today. So we appreciate it if you guys could fill it in for us.
So I will officially end the recording.